We turn now to Turkey, where the world has been watching the horrific mining accident. Rescue workers began winding up their operations today after finding the bodies of 2 more miners. The death toll now stands at 301, according to the energy minister. Turkey's worst industrial accident also triggered angry protests across the country. Let's have a look and talk it out.
The Soma mining company denies any wrongdoing in the disaster that has claimed over 280 lives.
There's no negligence with respect to this incident. We all worked with all our heart and soul. I have not seen anything like this in 20 years.
The mine officials said the facility had 1 safe room, which was later made obsolete. The added safe rooms are not a legal requirement according to Turkish mining laws. But victims' families are unhappy with the statements.
They're saying that there is no negligence in any incident where 284 people lost their lives. After this incident, I think human life in Turkey is not valued.
The Prime Minister's remarks about workplace accidents have also sparked anger and unrest among Turkish workers.
Joining us now is C.J. Abraham, a mining safety expert. Sevgi Akarcesme, a correspondent from today's Zaman in Istanbul, Turkey's largest newspaper. She joins us from Istanbul, and via Skype is Doug Blackburn. He is the managing member of Blackburn and a 4th-generation coal miner from Virginia. We welcome you all, and we thank you for your time. The first thing we want to do is, since you're the safety expert here, CJ, we want to talk about exactly how this happened.
This happened.
That would probably
Oil, a transformer exploding. That was the precipitating part of what happened here, and that caused all the initial damage.
Is this one of the worst accidents that you've seen?
Yes.
And I want to also talk to a friend over in Istanbul as well, Sevgi. I imagine that the reporters, I mean, this is such an enormous story with the protests as well. Can you describe the mood over there in Istanbul right now?
Sure. Actually, as Turkish people, reporters, journalists, we are almost accustomed to extraordinary situations because since last year, the unrest in the country continues for various reasons. But of course, this tragic accident, has been the last straw, if you will. People are extremely angry over possible negligence and lack of safety inspections in the mine. And unfortunately, the police is repressing the protests, not only in Istanbul and other parts of the country, but also in the accident zone in Soma, Manisa.
And if you can just I know you were talking about the protests and things like that, but we heard one person say that human life is not even valued right now in Turkey. That's a pretty extreme statement, but it certainly says a lot about the mood over there.
That's true. That's true. Actually, for people, unfortunately, of course, it's sad to admit that, but for someone who knows Turkey, it doesn't sound extreme at all. Because in Turkey, there has been previously similar accidents in 1992, which cost the lives of over 250 people as well. But unfortunately, Turkish people, the state, the private sector did not get the necessary lessons from that disaster. Unfortunately, Turkish people, being myself as Turkish, I think I'm allowed to say that we are notorious for not taking the necessary measures and not valuing human life as much as we are supposed to. So that statement is not an overstatement.
Thank you very much for explaining that. We also want to check in with Doug Blackburn. He is down in West Virginia, and you are a coal miner, Doug.
yes.
This is obviously a very dangerous job. In fact, we had an accident here in the U.S. as well where 2 miners were killed this week. In terms of precautions, obviously it's much different from country to country, but what kind of precautions can be taken as we move forward?
I think the inspections that'll come from this will set that new limits and new precautions. They're going to go beyond that fire of the transformer to look at accumulations of methane, which is probably the largest culprit, and the mine's ability to monitor it and control it. They're going to have to look at the ventilation systems and determine adequacy. Methane is only explosive in a very narrow range, and dilution with a ventilating current is critical. They're going to have to look at water. Methane has a temperature at which it ignites, and water is used to keep it below that temperature. They're going to look at having cleanup of the float coal dust, which is extremely explosive. And then they're going to have to look at coating the mine with limestone to keep down any explosibility. Once that inspection is complete and the after-action report is filed, then you can anticipate a legislature in any country reacting with technology forcing legislation,
Well, Doug,
beefing up the inspection efforts in terms of adequacy of numbers of inspectors, the quality of inspectors and their training.
Well, Doug, we certainly appreciate you explaining that. You know, there's been a lot of more EPA standards as well put onto the coal miners as coal mining industry. Do you think that is maybe causing some safety because these coal mining companies have to spend more money to meet the EPA regulations? Do you think that safety might be compromised, Dee Dee?
Well, yeah, I think this company, that's what happened. They didn't spend the money on the safety regulations. And you know what, to me, you know, I grew up in, or was born in eastern Kentucky, so a lot of relatives are in the coal mining. It's very dangerous. You have to have these restrictions. You have to have these regulations. This is the one time the government does need to step in. Now, saying to that point, Erdogan, what in the world is he doing? I mean, he is making this a farce, and that's something that Forbes said, and I believe that because he said, well, you know, this has happened since the 1900s in Great Britain. This happens all the time. You know, not as bad as happened in America. And then he had an aide call someone the spawn of Israel, and then, you know, or his aide punched him, and he called him the spawn of Israel, and just craziness. So I think Erdogan, he's handled this so incorrectly. He needs to take it serious. He needs to have compassion. And instead of worrying about taking Facebook and taking social media away from the people of Turkey, he needs to care about the people who died and the families of the people who died. That's unfortunate.
And you kind of want to wonder who's advising him
Exactly.
on some of those statements as well. Well, CJ, we also want to talk about moving forward. And obviously there were 2 accidents, the one in Turkey, which was just horrible. But what about these regulations and making them tougher?
Well,
how difficult is that to do?
What we can't do is compromise safety for production. That's number one. And we need inspectors with integrity, and that's the problem here too. Even though it has been infrequently inspected, the inspectors don't have any power whatsoever. It was for.
When you say inspectors have integrity, can you just kind of elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, it's open and obvious when you have oil-immersed transformers. They're ancient. You don't use them where you have a population or a number of workers working that are highly congregated. We're talking about 300 during a shift. It's over 700. They're shifting down. The shift is taking place well below rather than above. If, for example, inadvertently, instead of having it shifted below, if they had the shift above and they didn't weren't concerned about producing as much as possible per unit time, no one would have been injured based upon the time element it happened.
It brings up another interesting question, though, because obviously we were all doing a little research on this. Do we really need to produce coal? And of course, the U.S. produces 1 billion tons of coal a year, and half of that is transformed into energy. So the answer is obviously yes. But let's check in with Sevgi also regarding the Prime Minister and some of the statements that he made. Kind of unbelievable sitting here in the U.S. just listening to some of the statements that he made.
Unfortunately, they are unbelievable for those of us who are sitting in Istanbul and listening to him as well. First of all, I couldn't hear what other people in your program had to say, but I guess someone was referring to his comparisons. On the first day of the accident, in the wake of the accident, Prime Minister Erdogan compared the situation to accidents a century ago in the United Kingdom, in the United States in 1907. So, he compared Turkey to the underdeveloped, times of the world, and said that even further. He said that this is a part of the job. The nature of the job requires, almost requires that. That is a certain part of the job, which sparked a lot of, reaction from the people. But in addition to these, unfortunately, in addition to lack of safety, possible lack of inspections and negligence in the mine, what caused reaction in Turkey is the handling of the government of the protests. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister himself allegedly punched a person, slapped a guy. The guy himself said that he was slapped by the Prime Minister, and he expects an apology. He's not going to sue the Prime Minister. And on the other hand, there was this aide of the Prime Minister, someone from his staff, who literally kicked a protester in the disaster zone. Unfortunately,
yeah, we actually
made the headlines.
We did see some of those pictures there, Sevgi. In terms of Turkey attracting and the image this is putting on Turkey right now in terms of the ascension into the EU and also with foreign investors, what can you tell us about that?
Of course, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to guess that this mars Turkey's overall image. But unfortunately, the government seems almost as if it acts without any reason, irrationally, and with a very defensive mood. Actually, it's not independent from the corruption investigation that started. That was aborted actually since December. So since December of last year, the government itself considers everything, every protest, every opposition, every dissent as a coup, as a plot against itself, and tries to oppress any kind of protest, and it's intolerant of any protest or any opposition, and this is a part of it. So we can't interpret this event, this tragic accident or disaster, whatever you name it, without taking those previous developments into account in Turkey.
Sevgi, from today's Zaman, we thank you very much for your insights. CJ, final thoughts on this accident?
Well, I think the accidents are going to continue until the safety protocol is completely changed within the mines.
But that always costs a lot of money. That's one of the problems.
If you're not going to spend the money to make it safer for the miners should not be working there.
And then one last final question. In terms of the just the U.S., how many miners are actually working in mines across the country?
Thousands upon thousands.
It's amazing.
But we have a safety protocol that's followed, and we have many times the number of inspections, and the inspectors are well respected.
And we certainly want to thank our coal miner, Doug Blackburn, for joining us as well. Certainly a very dangerous job, and we thank you for your service. And keep it here to Fresh Outlook. We've got much more when we return.